Emily Carter had always dreamed of being a mom. Ever since she was a little girl, she pictured a white house with a picket fence, kids running around the backyard, and laughter echoing in the late afternoon. For years, she believed that dream would come true alongside Jason Miller, her ex-fiancé. Jason was the kind of guy who turned heads wherever he went. Handsome, ambitious, always with the right thing to say. At first, he said he loved Emily just the way she was, until the promises started falling apart. "Do you really think you can chase after a kid?" Jason would sometimes mock her, laughing with his buddies at the bar while Emily, embarrassed, pretended not to hear. "You should think about adopting a dog, Emily. It's more practical." Those words hurt way more than she cared to admit. But it wasn't just Jason. Even people close to her, co-workers, neighbors, even some family members, would give her that fake smile full of pity. Some whispered behind her back. Others made cruel comments disguised as concern. Emily put up with it all for way too long. She kept trying to believe that if she just stayed patient, things would change. That Jason would realize what an amazing mom she'd be. That love would win in the end. But the night Jason broke it off was the last lesson she needed. "You're not the kind of woman I want to build a family with, Em. Better just accept that." Those words cut deeper than any punch to the gut. It wasn't just that Jason was leaving her. He was crushing her most precious dream. It was in that moment, alone in the tiny apartment they used to share, that Emily made a decision. She wasn't going to let someone else's vision define her worth. If the world couldn't see the loving mother she could be, she would carve her own path. Now, months later, she was driving solo down the dusty roads of North Carolina, with everything she owned packed into an old cardboard box on the passenger seat. In big bold letters, one word summed up what she was carrying: hope. Inside the box were her adoption application papers, a dream album, and a handful of encouragement letters from people who truly believed in her. Rare people, but real ones. The sun beat down through the windshield as Emily left the main road behind, heading down a dirt path that seemed to lead straight into the middle of nowhere. Her heart pounded, part nerves, part fear. The adoption system in Oak Ridge was known for being more welcoming, less brutal. Maybe here she'd finally have a real shot at what she wanted most. But as if life wanted to test her resolve one more time, the car engine coughed, sputtered, and died, leaving her stranded in the middle of a deserted road. "Seriously?" Emily muttered, tapping the steering wheel lightly. No cell signal, no towns nearby, just golden fields stretching out to the horizon. She opened the door, the thick heat wrapping around her like a blanket, and stepped out onto the side of the road, glancing around with no clue what to do. Loneliness, that old familiar shadow, crept up on her again, whispering doubts she tried to silence. That's when she heard it, a sound in the distance. An engine. Turning, she saw a red pickup truck coming her way, kicking up a cloud of dust behind it. The truck slowed down, and from the open window a man with a baseball cap and an easy smile looked out at her. "Need some help, ma'am?" he asked, his voice deep but kind. Emily hesitated. Trusting wasn't exactly easy for her, not after everything she'd been through, but something about this man, the way he looked at her without judgment, without pity, made her take a deep breath and step forward. "My car broke down," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. The man hopped out of the truck, walking over with calm, steady steps. "Ben Lawson," he said, holding out his hand. "Emily," she replied, accepting his strong, genuine handshake. While Ben worked under the hood with practiced hands, Emily hugged her box of dreams tightly against her chest. Maybe this forgotten little town wasn't just a new beginning. Maybe, she thought, looking up at the vast blue sky, it was the place where her dream would finally bloom. And right there on a lost road in the middle of nowhere, her hope, though battered, was still very much alive. Before we dive back into this amazing story, if you're already feeling Emily's strength and determination in your heart, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and comment down below what city you're watching this beautiful story from. Now let's get back to the moment that changed everything for Emily. Ben Lawson worked quickly and efficiently, but the look on his face didn't bring good news. He shut the car's hood and looked at Emily, running a hand over his scruffy beard in a thoughtful gesture. "You're gonna need a tow," he said, pulling off his cap to fix his messy hair. "And out here?" Well, there's not much except farms and a few scattered houses. Emily bit her lip, feeling that old panic start to rise in her throat. But before she could get lost in her own thoughts, Ben smiled. A real, calming smile. Look, my farm's just a few minutes from here. It's nothing fancy, but it's got a landline. You can call from there and sort out whatever you need. Emily hesitated. Accepting help wasn't exactly easy after everything she'd been through. But the genuine warmth in Ben's eyes made her think that maybe, just this once, trusting someone might not be such a bad idea. All right, she said, her voice coming out smaller than she would have liked. Ben helped carry the cardboard box to the truck, treating it with a kind of respect that caught her off guard. Most people looked at her dreams like they were a joke, but he seemed to understand how important they were to her. As they drove down the narrow road, Emily caught herself taking in the scenery. Green fields rolled under the breeze, a lake shimmered in the distance, and a line of old trees cast a welcoming shade over the road. You heading to Oak Ridge? Ben asked, keeping his eyes on the road. Emily nodded. Yeah, I'm trying to start over. Ben shot her a quick glance, full of understanding. Starting over's good. Sometimes you gotta lose everything to find what really matters. Those simple words, spoken so naturally, warmed something deep inside her. A few minutes later, they pulled into the farm. It was a modest place, with a white wooden house that looked like it had popped straight out of an old postcard. A weathered red barn stood proudly next to the house, and a few chickens lazily scratched around the yard. It's not much, but it's home, Ben said, parking the truck. Emily smiled, feeling a strange sense of peace. She didn't know what was waiting for her here, but for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like running. Inside the house, the smell of fresh coffee wrapped around her like a hug. The walls were lined with family photos, simple paintings, and furniture that looked like it had seen generations come and go. Ben pointed to the phone hanging on the kitchen wall. Help yourself. While Emily dialed the insurance company, she glanced at Ben now and then. He didn't seem rushed, and he didn't look at her with pity or judgment like she was so used to. It was like, in this forgotten corner of the world, she could just be. When she hung up, Emily turned to him, not quite sure what to say. Thank you, she murmured. Ben just smiled and nodded, like it was the most natural thing in the world. And if you want, he said, pulling a kettle off the stove, there's some apple pie. My mom always said pie solves half the world's problems. Emily laughed, a sound she barely recognized coming from herself. Maybe, she thought as she sat down at the table. Just maybe. That broken road and this day lost on the map were exactly the fresh start she needed. Emily accepted a slice of warm, fragrant apple pie, and for the first time in a long while, she felt comfortable. The simple kitchen, the sweet smell in the air, Ben's easy smile, it all seemed so far from the judgment-filled life she'd left behind. As she took her first bite, Ben pulled out a chair and sat across from her. So, he said, resting his elbows on the table, what brings you to a forgotten place like Oak Ridge? Emily hesitated. It was tempting to make up a simple answer. Say she was just passing through, that it was only a temporary stop. But looking into those sincere eyes, she felt like being honest. I want to adopt a child, she said, almost in a whisper. It's always been my dream to be a mom. Ben didn't laugh, didn't mock, didn't throw her a look full of judgment. He just nodded like she'd said the most normal thing in the world. There's a lot of kids around here who need love, he said, grabbing his own slice of pie. More than people realize. Emily blinked quickly, fighting off the unexpected emotion rising in her throat. It was rare to meet someone who just accepted you. Do you have kids? She asked, wanting to change the subject. Ben shook his head, the smile fading just a bit. No, I had a wife, but she passed a few years ago. Car accident. I'm sorry, Emily said right away, her chest tightening at the pain that still flickered behind his eyes. Ben shrugged, like someone who'd made peace with missing someone. Life is what it is. You learn to move on. Emily thought about Jason, the broken dreams, the cruel words that still echoed sometimes on her worst days. Yeah, moving on was what she was trying to do too, in her own way. When they finished eating, Ben washed the dishes while Emily looked out the kitchen window. Outside, the sky was streaked with orange and pink, announcing the end of another day. There's a guest room, Ben said, turning off the faucet. If the tow truck doesn't show up till tomorrow, you can stay the night here. No need to worry. Emily hesitated. It was tempting to say yes, but saying yes meant trusting. And she knew all too well the price of trusting the wrong people. Ben, almost like he could feel the weight of her hesitation, just added, "No pressure. The door's open if you want it." And somehow those simple words broke down the last wall inside her. "Thank you," she said, feeling the heavy loneliness she carried lighten just a little. As she climbed the stairs and settled into the small bedroom, Emily looked at the box with her adoption documents. Her dreams were still there, crumpled, scratched up, but alive. Lying in bed, listening to the soft sound of the wind against the window, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Outside, stars were starting to poke through the dark North Carolina sky, silent witnesses to the truth that sometimes the most beautiful new beginnings are born from our most broken pieces. And Emily was ready, finally, to bloom. The sunrise in Oak Ridge was unlike anything Emily had ever known. The air smelled of damp earth and old wood, and the soft light filtered through the curtains of the guest room, casting everything in a golden glow. She stretched slowly, hearing the wood creak under her movements, and smiled to herself. It wasn't a five-star hotel. It wasn't the home she had once dreamed of building with Jason. But it was a start. Downstairs in the kitchen, Ben was already up, frying eggs and whistling quietly. The scene was so simple, so ridiculously normal, that Emily had to blink a few times to make sure it was real. "Good morning," she said, walking down the stairs. Ben smiled and slid a mug of coffee toward her. "Hope you like strong coffee. We don't do anything fancy around here." Emily laughed, accepting the mug gratefully. Strong is perfect. As they drank their coffee, Ben talked about Oak Ridge, a small town where everybody knew everybody, where folks smiled at the market and waved from their cars. "If you're thinking about starting the adoption process here," Ben said, "you'll want to talk to Mrs. Turner. She's the social worker. Good people." Emily made a mental note of the name, her heart picking up speed. Everything felt possible and terrifying all at once. After breakfast, Ben drove her into town. Oak Ridge was charming, with its colorful shops, narrow streets, and kids playing in the town squares. People glanced at her curiously but not judgmentally. It was different from the stares Emily had learned to fear. Here, she was just a new face in town. Nothing more, nothing less. The social worker, Mrs. Turner, was a short, energetic woman, her gray hair pulled into a loose bun, her eyes sharp but kind. "So you want to adopt," she said, flipping through Emily's papers. "You know it's not easy, right?" Emily nodded, her resolve firm. "I know." Mrs. Turner studied Emily for a long moment, like she was trying to see past the paperwork, past the appearance, past the whispers Emily had gotten so used to hearing. Finally, the woman smiled. "We've got a few kids in foster homes who need something more stable, something real. If you're willing to go through the process, we need moms like you." The words hit deep. Emily felt her eyes sting and blinked quickly to fight back the tears. "I'm willing," she said, her voice rough with emotion. Mrs. Turner nodded, pulling out a stack of paperwork. "Then let's get started." As Emily began filling out the first forms, she could feel the weight of her past slipping away, like sand running through her fingers. It didn't matter what Jason had said. It didn't matter what anyone else had thought. She was there. She was fighting. And for the first time in a long time, she believed she could win. The next few days passed by in a blur for Emily. Between interviews, paperwork, and meetings with Mrs. Turner, she threw herself headfirst into the adoption process. Every answer, every signature was a mix of fear and hope. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she also knew the best things in life rarely were. It was on a cool Wednesday afternoon that Mrs. Turner called her. "Emily," said the excited voice on the other end of the line, "we have 3 children who they might be just perfect for you." Emily's heart raced. She barely managed to scribble down the address before rushing out to meet the social worker. When she arrived at the small foster home, she was so nervous her hands were shaking. Ben, who had offered to drive her there, gave her shoulder a light squeeze before she got out of the truck. "It's gonna be all right," he said, flashing that calm smile of his that seemed capable of stopping any storm. Emily took a deep breath and walked across the yard. Inside the house, the smell of freshly baked cookies hung in the air, and colorful toys were scattered across the living room. A little boy with dark hair was playing alone with a toy truck, while two girls whispered to each other in a corner, trading shy glances. These are Max, 5 years old, and the sisters Lila and Daisy, 7 and 4, Mrs. Turner said, smiling. Emily stopped, her heart melting instantly. They were small, fragile, and full of a wary look she knew all too well. The kind of wariness that comes from being abandoned more times than you can count. She knelt down, trying to bridge the distance. "Hey, Max," she said with a warm smile. "That's a really cool truck. Do you like cars?" Max looked at her suspiciously but slowly pushed the truck toward her, like he was testing her. Emily accepted it, pushing it back to him. The boy let out a tiny, almost invisible smile. The girls watched her closely. Emily turned to them. "Do you like to draw?" she asked. Lila nodded, her big eyes cautious. Daisy just hid behind her sister, sucking her thumb. Emily didn't push. She just sat there on the floor, rolling the truck back and forth, letting them watch her, feel her presence, and understand she wasn't going anywhere. Because she knew better than anyone that trust was something you had to build, patiently. After a while, Lila came closer, holding a piece of paper and some colored pencils. "Want to draw with us?" she asked, her voice small and full of hope. Emily smiled, feeling her chest fill with something so beautiful it almost hurt. "I'd love to," she said. As they drew, flowers, cars, houses, and pink suns, Emily felt for the first time in forever that she was exactly where she was meant to be. There, sitting on the floor of a house full of broken stories, she found the first threads of true love starting to weave between her and those 3 little lives. Visits to Max, Lila, and Daisy became the best part of Emily's days. Every afternoon after finishing her temp jobs around Oak Ridge, she would head to the foster home, sit on the floor, draw, put puzzles together, or just listen to the kids. Whenever they wanted to talk, it wasn't easy. Max was still reserved, preferring to play alone most of the time. Lila, despite her calm appearance, was full of hard questions. "Are you gonna leave too?" And Daisy. Daisy was a mystery with big eyes, always hiding behind her sister, quietly taking everything in. Emily never promised anything she couldn't keep. She didn't say nothing would ever change or that the world was perfect, but she was there, day after day, smile after smile. Ben sometimes came along too, always in his quiet way, like he somehow knew she needed him even if she didn't say it out loud. He had become a steady, silent presence by her side, and Emily started to realize that maybe the universe wasn't just giving her children. Maybe it was showing her what a real partnership looked like. On a particularly hot afternoon while Emily was helping Max set up a toy car track, he looked up at her, his brow furrowed. "Are you coming back tomorrow?" he asked. Emily paused for a moment, her heart squeezing with tenderness. "I will," she said firmly. "I always come back." Max didn't respond, just nodded, like he was testing the promise in his mind. And Emily knew. That's how you earned the trust of someone who had been let down too many times. When she got home that night, Ben was waiting on the porch, 2 mugs of tea in his hands. "How'd it go?" he asked, handing one to Emily. She sat down next to him, sighing as she looked up at the starry sky. Slow, but it's happening. "They're starting to trust me." Ben smiled, that steady, calming smile of his. "And you're starting to trust yourself," he said. Emily turned her head to look at him, surprised by how right he was. Maybe he was right. Maybe after all the years of hearing the world tell her she wasn't enough, that she wasn't capable, Emily was finally starting to believe she deserved love. Not just any love, but a full, unconditional kind. She smiled, feeling a peace she hadn't known in ages. "Thank you, Ben," she said softly. He just shrugged, gazing up at the stars. "Everyone needs someone who believes in them, Emily. Sometimes we just need to be reminded of who we really are." And that night, as the warm North Carolina breeze brushed against her face, Emily knew, with a quiet certainty, that she wasn't alone anymore. The big day came faster than Emily had expected. The hearing that would decide Max, Lila, and Daisy's adoption was set for a cool Friday morning. The air in Oak Ridge smelled of damp earth after the rain, and the sky was blanketed with gray clouds, like even it shared in the nervousness Emily felt. Ben parked the truck in front of the small-town courthouse and turned to look at her. "Take a breath, Em," he said, his voice calm. You've already done the hardest part. Emily tried to smile, but her hands were shaking. What if the judge thought she wasn't good enough? What if everything Jason and the others had said turned out to be true after all? Old doubts tried to creep into her mind, but she pushed them away. She wasn't that woman anymore, the one who let others define her worth. Emily stepped out of the truck with her head held high, her box of hope, not literally this time, but alive inside her, beating with every step. Inside the courtroom, Max, Lila, and Daisy were already sitting in a row of chairs, their tiny hands gripping each other tightly. When they saw Emily, all three smiled, shy but real. Her heart nearly burst in her chest. Mrs. Turner, ever practical, gave her a small nod of encouragement before sitting down beside the kids. The judge was an older man with gray hair and a serious expression, but there was kindness in his eyes. He flipped through the documents, adjusted his glasses, and then looked directly at Emily. "Emily Carter," he began, his deep voice echoing through the silent room. "Are you aware of the commitments you're taking on?" Emily stood up, her voice steadier than she expected. "Yes, Your Honor." "Are you aware of the challenges ahead? Of the sacrifices that will be required?" "Yes," she said, her gaze unwavering. The judge flipped through a few more pages. "Why do you believe you should be the mother of these children?" Emily took a deep breath, and then with her heart wide open she spoke. "Because I know what it's like to be doubted. I know what it feels like when no one believes in you. And I know how much that hurts," she began, her voice cracking. "These kids deserve someone who will never, ever give up on them. Someone who won't measure love by size, looks, or the past. I'm not perfect, but I'm steady. I'm present, and I want to give them something I fought so hard to find myself. A home where they're loved exactly as they are." For a moment, silence filled the room. Max, sitting in the front row, dropped his little toy truck and ran straight to her, wrapping his arms tightly around her leg. Lila and Daisy quickly followed, clutching at Emily's skirt with their tiny hands. The judge smiled, a small smile but full of warmth. "Well then," he said, banging the gavel with a sound that seemed to echo straight into Emily's heart. "It's decided. The adoption is approved." Emily blinked, hardly able to believe it. She crouched down, hugging the three of them tightly, feeling hot tears roll down her cheeks. She had done it. They were a family. Ben, standing at the back of the room, grinned broadly, and when Emily looked at him, she saw more than just support. She saw the future, a future built on love, hope, and brand new roots. Ben's truck rumbled softly down the dirt road as Emily watched the three little faces in the back seat through the rearview mirror. Max was glued to the window, taking in everything with wide, curious eyes. Lila was holding Daisy's hand, and Daisy clutched the worn teddy bear she'd gotten at the foster home. The whole world felt different now. It wasn't just Emily driving to a new house, it was four hearts, four intertwined stories starting over. Ben, driving beside her, shot her a quick, knowing look. "Ready for this?" he asked, half teasing, half serious. Emily let out a nervous laugh, wringing her hands in her lap. "No," she admitted. "But I don't think anybody ever is." Ben smiled. "If you were, it wouldn't be real." The farm gate creaked open with a familiar sound, and Emily felt her chest tighten. She didn't know if the place was perfect. She didn't know if she had all the answers, but she knew it was real. And sometimes that was all that mattered. When they stopped in front of the white wooden house, Max was the first to jump out of the truck, looking around with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. "Is this our house now?" he asked, his small voice cutting through the quiet of the countryside. Emily swallowed hard and nodded. "Yeah, Max, it's our house." Lila climbed out slowly, pulling Daisy along, her big eyes taking in everything. The old swing hanging from the tree, the weathered red barn, the smell of pie drifting from the kitchen. Ben had thought of everything. There was a brand new doormat on the porch that said "Welcome," and inside the house, simple toys and colorful books were tucked into little baskets here and there. Emily knelt down in front of them, looking each of them in the eye. "You're safe here," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You're loved here, and no one's going anywhere." For a moment, nobody moved. Then, all of a sudden, Daisy dropped her teddy bear and ran into Emily's arms, hugging her tightly. Lila came next, squeezing into the hug, and Max, the cautious, guarded one, hesitated just a second before joining them, his small arms wrapping tightly around Emily. Right there, on the porch of a simple house in Oak Ridge, Emily Carter found what she had been searching for. A family. The first night wasn't perfect. Max had nightmares and ran into Emily's room in the middle of the night. Lila cried softly because she had forgotten her drawing notebook at the old house. Daisy got scared of the barn noises at night. Emily didn't have all the answers. She improvised. She sang off-key lullabies, made up silly bedtime stories, and held their tiny hands until they fell asleep. Sitting on the hallway floor, leaning against the kids' bedroom door, Emily let the tears fall silently. She wasn't perfect, but she was theirs. And that was all that mattered. When the night dragged on and exhaustion weighed heavy on her shoulders, Ben came down the stairs quietly. "You okay?" he asked in a low voice. Emily smiled, tired but happy. "I'm exactly where I always wanted to be," she replied. Ben sat down next to her, and for a while they just stayed there in silence, listening to the kids' steady breathing. "Welcome to your new life, Em," he said, handing her a mug of hot tea. She accepted it, feeling the warmth spread through her. Finally, after so many broken promises and shattered dreams, Emily had found her place in the world. And she knew, with every beat of her heart, that from now on, nothing would be stronger than the love they were building together. The new routine was a shock for everyone. In the first few days, the house felt like a testing ground. Max knocked over toys and ran down the hallways like a little tornado. Lila wanted to help with everything but left a trail of mess behind. Daisy clung to Emily like she was afraid she'd vanish any second. And Emily tried to be everything at once: mom, nurse, storyteller, chef, referee, and nightmare fighter. It was exhausting, it was chaotic, and it was wonderful. Every little step forward was a victory Emily carried in her heart like an invisible trophy. Daisy's first real smile. Max's first uninhibited laugh as he ran through the backyard with Ben chasing him. Lila's first drawing with the word family scribbled across the top. But there were hard days too. Days when Max would shut down, refusing to speak. Nights when Lila would wake up crying and needed to be rocked back to sleep like a baby. Afternoons when Daisy would sit by the front door, waiting for someone who was never coming back. Emily learned that being a mother wasn't about having all the answers. It was about being there, day after day, ready to try again. One afternoon, as the sun painted the sky orange, Emily found Ben fixing a broken fence in the backyard. She walked up slowly, watching the way he worked. Patient, steady. "You look like you've got it all under control," she said, smiling. Ben looked up at her from under his cap, sweat dripping down his forehead. "This fence took a lifetime to learn how to stand," he said, patting one of the firmly set posts. "Same as us." Emily leaned against the gate, crossing her arms. "Sometimes I feel like I'm messing up more than I'm getting it right." Ben set down the hammer and walked over to her, his gaze serious. "Em, you're not messing up. You're building. And building's messy before it turns into something beautiful." Emily blinked, letting those simple but powerful words sink in. "Thank you," she said, her voice nearly lost in the sound of the wind. Ben smiled and lightly touched her hand. "You're not alone, remember?" Emily squeezed his hand back, letting the warmth of that simple gesture remind her of something she was starting to understand. She didn't have to be perfect to be enough. She just had to be present. And that she was. That night, after bath time, bedtime stories, and lights out, Emily crawled into bed exhausted. But before she could even close her eyes, Max appeared at the door, clutching his old toy truck. "Can I sleep here tonight?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Emily lifted the blanket without hesitation. Max ran to the bed and snuggled up beside her, holding his truck tight to his chest. A moment later, Lila appeared, dragging her colorful pillow. "Me too?" Emily chuckled softly and nodded. And of course Daisy wasn't far behind, her teddy bear tucked under her arm. The bed got crowded, the covers got tangled, little feet got twisted up with hers. But Emily had never, in her whole life, felt so complete. She kissed each of their foreheads, whispering goodnight, and fell asleep with a smile on her lips and a new, wonderful feeling blooming in her chest. The absolute certainty that even on the hard days, even when everything seemed to go wrong, she was exactly where she was meant to be. The first day of school came before Emily was ready. She spent the night before packing backpacks, labeling notebooks, and trying to hide the growing panic in her chest. Max, Lila, and Daisy needed stability, routine, a place where they belonged. But Emily knew, from her own experience, that the world wasn't always kind to those who were different. The next morning, she dressed the kids in simple, comfortable clothes, tied Lila and Daisy's hair with colorful ribbons, and did her best to tame Max's messy hair. On the drive to school, Ben kept quiet, respecting the tension hanging in the air. When they pulled up in front of the entrance, Emily turned to the three of them. "Listen," she said, her voice low but firm. "You're amazing, no matter what happens today. If anyone says something hurtful, remember, other people's words don't define who you are." Max nodded slowly. Lila bit her lip. Daisy clung tightly to her sister's hand. Emily smiled, trying to project a confidence she wasn't sure she really felt. "I'll be right here at pickup time waiting for you," she promised. They nodded, and with hesitant steps disappeared into the school. Emily stood there watching until she couldn't see them anymore, her chest tightening painfully. Ben came up and placed a hand on her shoulder. "They're gonna be all right, Em." Emily just nodded, unable to speak. The hours dragged by. Emily tried to distract herself by helping Ben with little repairs around the farm, but her mind was stuck on that red brick building where her kids were, alone for the first time. When the final bell rang, she rushed to the school, her heart pounding wildly. Max was the first to come out, dragging his backpack on the ground, a scowl on his face. Lila followed, her head down. Daisy clutched her teddy bear so tight it looked like it might fall apart. Emily's smile faded as she saw them. "How was it?" she asked, kneeling to their level. Max shrugged. "Nobody wanted to play with me." Lila shrugged too. "The girls said it's weird that we don't have a dad." Daisy just bit her lip, her eyes shining. Emily felt anger bubble up under her skin, but she took a deep breath. She couldn't stop the world from being cruel, but she could teach her kids to be stronger than any judgment. She pulled the three of them into a tight hug. "Listen," she said, her voice firm. "You have something a lot of people spend their whole lives looking for, a family that truly loves you. And that's what matters." Max sniffled. Lila nodded slowly and Daisy let out a tiny sigh. Ben showed up behind them, smiling. "Did you know," he said, leaning in and speaking in a conspiratorial tone, "that the best families are the ones you choose?" Max lifted his head. "Like heroes?" Ben winked. "Exactly. Only the best heroes have chosen families." Max seemed to think about that. Lila gave a small smile. Daisy let out a little giggle. Emily felt the knot in her chest loosen. They were hurt, sure, but they were together. And together they could face anything. That night, after eating pancakes on the porch and telling stories under the stars, Emily realized that maybe the world would always try to push them down. But as long as they had each other, as long as they had love, they would always get back up. The following days passed in a rhythm Emily had learned to love. Simple, full of small challenges and quiet victories. Max was starting to open up at school, showing off his skills with toy cars and earning some attention from classmates. Lila, always protective, made sure to keep an eye on Daisy during recess. And Daisy, shy as ever, was starting to smile more, especially when she saw Emily waiting at the school gate. It was slow progress, but it was real. One Saturday afternoon, Emily woke up to strange noises coming from the kitchen, hurried whispers, little feet running back and forth, the clinking of pots and pans. She got up slowly, pulled on her robe, and made her way downstairs, curious and a little suspicious. When she reached the kitchen, she found the most adorable and chaotic scene she'd ever seen. Max was trying to pour juice into cups, Lila was arranging colorful napkins on the table, and Daisy was holding a wobbly tray with a somewhat lopsided chocolate cake. The moment they saw her in the doorway, all three froze like little thieves caught red-handed. Max was the first to recover. "Surprise!" he yelled, throwing his arms in the air. Lila grabbed a folded piece of paper and ran over to Emily, handing it to her with a nervous smile. Emily opened the paper, her heart already beating faster. In the center of the page, drawn in colored pencil, were 4 stick figures holding hands. A woman with brown hair, a boy holding a truck, a girl with a pink bow, and a smaller girl with a big brown teddy bear. At the top, in shaky letters, it read, "Our family. We love you, Mommy." Emily brought a hand to her mouth, feeling the tears spring to her eyes before she could even try to stop them. "Mommy," Daisy repeated, her tiny voice full of certainty. It was like the whole world stopped right then. The lopsided cake, the spilled juice, the anxious smiles. It was all perfect in a way Emily could never have planned. She dropped to her knees, opening her arms wide, and the three of them rushed into her embrace, wrapping her in a messy, tight hug. "I love you," Emily whispered into their soft hair, "more than anything in this world." Behind her, at the kitchen door, Ben watched the scene, a calm, proud smile lighting up his face. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Their happiness was too obvious to need words. Later, sitting on the porch, savoring messy slices of chocolate cake, Emily watched her children, playing in the yard, running around with Ben chasing after them, laughing until they couldn't breathe. She leaned her head back against the house wall and closed her eyes for a moment. The road that had led her here had been hard, full of pain, loss, and fear. But looking now, at the backyard bathed in sunset light, at those little souls calling out for her, at the man who had quietly supported her every step of the way, Emily knew. It had all been worth it. Every tear, every doubt, every no. It had all led to this perfect, imperfect moment. Her family, her home, her life. Fall arrived quickly in Oak Ridge. Golden leaves covered the farm grounds, and the air carried a cozy chill that made Emily want to bake pies and wrap the kids up in warm blankets. Life was peaceful, simple, happy, until the past came knocking. Literally, it was just an ordinary morning. Emily was sweeping the porch while Max and Lila played with Daisy in the grass. Ben had left early to pick up tools from town. When the black pickup truck pulled up, kicking up dust at the entrance, Emily didn't recognize the vehicle right away. But when Jason Miller, her ex-fiancé, stepped out of the car, wearing that same arrogant smile she knew all too well, the air around her seemed to freeze. For a second, Emily stood still, her heart pounding in her chest. Part of her wanted to run, like she had so many times before. Part of her wanted to scream, but then Max let out a loud laugh, pulling her attention back to what really mattered. Emily took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and stepped down from the porch. Jason took off his sunglasses, scanning the farm with a cynical look. "So, this is where you ended up," he said, his voice dripping with irony. Emily kept her face calm. "How can I help you, Jason?" He laughed humorlessly. "Saw your name on the adoption papers. Figured it couldn't be true." Emily crossed her arms, standing firm. "Well, it is. And if you came here to try to tear me down, don't even bother." Jason shrugged, his eyes drifting toward the kids playing in the distance. "They're your kids now? Is that it?" "Yes," Emily replied with a quiet pride she had never known she possessed. "And they're the best thing that's ever happened to me." Jason scoffed, disbelieving. "You? A mom? I always thought you weren't cut out for it." The words, which once would have stabbed her in the heart, now fell off her like dead leaves. Emily stepped closer, her voice calm and powerful. "You're entitled to think whatever you want, Jason. But your opinions don't define my life. Not anymore." Jason looked unsettled, like he had expected to see her break down, cry, beg. But Emily just stared back, steady, unshakable. "If you don't have anything else to say," she continued, "I have kids to raise and a life to live. A happy life." Jason hesitated, the arrogance slowly draining from him in the face of the woman he barely recognized. Without a word, he slipped his sunglasses back on and walked to his truck. Emily watched him leave, a cloud of dust rising behind his tires. When she turned around, she saw Ben standing on the porch, arms crossed, a small, proud smile on his lips. "You were incredible," he said, coming down the steps to join her. Emily shrugged, her heart still racing. "I needed to close that door." Ben reached for her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. "You didn't just close it. You locked it, and threw away the key." Emily smiled, feeling a wave of relief so strong it almost made her float. The past no longer had any power over her. She was a free woman, a real mother, someone who had overcome everything they said she would never be. And for the first time, Emily felt proud of who she had become. The days after Jason's visit felt like a deep, cleansing sigh. Emily felt lighter, more alive, like she had shrugged off a heavy burden she hadn't even realized she was carrying. She was free now, free to love, to be loved, to build without fear of someone tearing her down. And it was impossible not to notice that Ben was always around. Always ready to fix a broken fence, teach Max how to play baseball, build a treehouse with Lila and Daisy, or just sit with Emily on the porch at the end of the day. It was like he had become part of the home without anyone needing to say it out loud. One golden autumn afternoon, while Emily and Ben watched the kids running around the yard, the conversation took an unexpected turn. "Ever think," Ben said, his voice easy, "about how funny life is?" Emily turned to him curious. "How so?" Ben rested his elbows on his knees, watching the children. "You spend so much time chasing after what you think you need, and in the end, you find exactly what you really needed in the most unlikely place." Emily smiled, feeling her chest warm. "I thought I needed approval," she said, mostly to herself. "Validation. Someone to tell me I was good enough." She paused, watching Max try to convince Daisy to climb up into the newly built treehouse. "But all I really needed was to believe in myself." Ben turned to her then, and for the first time there wasn't just affection in his eyes. There was something deeper, something Emily recognized instantly because she felt it too. Love. Not the rushed, expectation-laden love she had known before, but a calm, steady love that grew slowly and rooted itself deeply. Ben reached out and, with a tenderness that made her catch her breath, brushed a fallen leaf from her hair. "And now?" he asked, his voice low. "What do you believe in?" Emily bit her lip, feeling her heart pound unevenly. "I believe," she said, her voice trembling with emotion, "that I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." Ben smiled, that slow, beautiful smile that seemed to hold all the autumn sky. And then, as if the whole world held its breath, he leaned in and kissed her. It was a sweet, tender kiss, full of silent promises. And Emily knew, without a single doubt, that she was living a new beginning, the kind of beginning she once thought only existed in dreams. When they pulled apart, Ben rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Emily Carter," he whispered. She smiled, feeling the happy tears burn her eyes, but this time they were tears of pure joy. "I love you too, Ben Lawson." The kids, oblivious to the moment that would change their lives forever, kept playing, their laughter floating through the air like music. And Emily, her heart overflowing with love, knew. She hadn't just found her family. She had found her home. News of Emily and Ben's love spread quickly through Oak Ridge. But unlike the judgmental stares Emily had once feared, the small town embraced the news with open arms. After all, Oak Ridge was made up of people who believed in new beginnings, in strong new roots growing where once there had only been broken ground. And nothing symbolized a new beginning better than a party. It was Mrs. Turner's idea, of course. "You've got to celebrate this," she said, smiling as she sipped tea on the porch with Emily. "A new family deserves an official fresh start." Emily laughed, a little shyly. "I don't know if we're the big party type." Mrs. Turner raised an eyebrow like Emily had just said the silliest thing in the world. "It doesn't have to be big, it just has to be real." And so, a week later, the preparations began. Max, Lila, and Daisy were beyond excited. They helped make the invitations, hand-drawn, scribbled with colored pencils and tons of love, and delivered them personally to every neighbor they knew. Ben spent entire days building picnic tables and stringing lights through the old oak tree in the center of the farm. Emily, with help from the kids, baked apple pies, butter cookies, and made fresh lemonade. The farm transformed into something straight out of a fairy tale, twinkling lights hanging from the trees, colorful ribbons dancing in the breeze, and a long table covered in wildflowers. On the afternoon of the big day, Emily paused for a moment on the porch, her eyes shining as she took it all in. Max was running around the yard with Ben, trying to catch runaway balloons. Lila was carefully arranging flowers on the tables, with Daisy holding the ribbons for her. It was simple. It was imperfect. And it was absolutely perfect. The guests started arriving little by little. Neighbors, friends, schoolmates, even the principal, who brought a chicken pot pie she claimed was famous across 3 counties. There was music, laughter, and the mouth-watering smell of good food in the air. Emily moved among the guests naturally, laughing, hugging, and accepting well wishes that warmed her more than the late afternoon sun. At one point, Ben tapped lightly on a glass with a spoon to get everyone's attention. The chatter quieted. Emily turned to him, surprised, her heart racing. Ben cleared his throat, a little shy but with his eyes locked on hers. "This woman right here," he said, pointing at Emily, "changed my life. Changed the lives of these 3 little rascals running around. And she changed her own too." Soft laughter echoed through the crowd. "Today we're not just celebrating a new relationship, an adoption, or a new home. We're celebrating what happens when you choose love, even when you've got every reason in the world to give up on it." Emily felt tears prick her eyes. Ben stepped closer, pulled a small box from his pocket, and got down on one knee right there in front of everyone. "Emily Carter," he said, his voice steady and full of emotion, "you gave me a family. You taught me to believe again. Will you marry me?" The world went still. The kids stared at her with wide eyes. The guests held their breath. Emily laughed and cried at the same time, her heart bursting. "Yes," she said without hesitation. Ben stood up and kissed her as Max, Lila, and Daisy jumped and cheered around them. The party exploded in applause, whistles, and lots of laughter. There, under the soft lights, surrounded by friends and chosen family, Emily knew. This was the real happy ending. Not perfect, not planned, but exactly what she needed, what they all needed. A new family, built from courage, love, and faith. After the engagement party, the farm was never quite the same again. There was a new energy in the air, a happy buzz, like even the trees and fields were smiling at the news. Max, Lila, and Daisy were glowing, more excited than ever. For them, Emily and Ben's wedding wasn't just a party. It was confirmation of what they already knew in their hearts, that this family was forever. And Emily felt like she was finally living the life God had always dreamed for her. Preparations started immediately, but Emily and Ben wanted to keep it simple. No fancy dresses or formal ceremonies. They wanted something that felt like them, intimate, welcoming, and full of love. The kids insisted on being part of everything. Max insisted on building an altar with Ben, and even though the project came out a little crooked, nobody had the heart to fix it. Lila designed the invitations, filling them with hearts, flowers, and even a few farm chickens. And Daisy declared with all the fierce determination of a 4-year-old that she would be in charge of tossing flower petals down the aisle. Emily knew the wedding wouldn't be perfect in the traditional sense. It would be better. It would be real. One night, while Ben was working in the barn and the kids were already in their pajamas, Emily called the 3 of them out onto the porch. She had something important to tell them. Max climbed into her lap. Lila and Daisy snuggled up next to her, all sharing a warm blanket. The cool night breeze danced around them, carrying the sweet scent of wood and damp earth. Emily took a deep breath, trying to steady her emotions. "I want to make a promise to you," she began, her voice soft. "Before I promise love and loyalty to Ben on our wedding day, I want to promise something to the 3 of you." Max looked at her with his big, serious eyes. Lila squeezed her hand. Daisy rested her head on her shoulder. "I promise," Emily said, her voice breaking, "to love you every day of my life, to hold your hand when you're scared, to celebrate every victory, to wipe away every tear. I promise to be your home, no matter where we are." The children stayed silent, soaking in every word like seeds planted deep in their hearts. Emily continued, "You didn't just get a mom. You got someone who will fight for you until her last breath. And I got the greatest gift in the world. You." Max sniffled loudly, trying to hide his tears the way only a 5-year-old boy could. Lila wiped her eyes quickly with the sleeve of her pajamas. And Daisy, with her sleepy little voice, murmured, "I love you, Mommy." Emily closed her eyes, letting that phrase carve itself forever into her soul. "I love you too," she whispered, hugging them tightly. There, under the North Carolina stars, between promises and silent dreams, a family grew even stronger, not by blood, not by obligation, but by chosen love, by planted love, and above all, by love that would never give up. The sun rose bright on the morning of the wedding. It was as if even the sky knew this was going to be a special day. Emily woke early, hearing the kids running through the house. Laughter, hurried footsteps, excited voices. She smiled to herself, feeling that familiar mix of nerves and happiness that only came on the days that truly mattered. Outside, the farm looked like a living painting. The tables were covered with wildflowers. White ribbons swayed in the trees. and the altar, crooked, built by Max and Ben, was decorated with ivy and daisies, simple and beautiful just the way they wanted. Emily dressed slowly in a room bathed in the soft light of morning. Her dress was simple, white, lightweight fabric, with lace sleeves and a skirt that danced in the breeze. No flashy jewelry, just a small locket around her neck, with a photo inside of her with Max, Lila, and Daisy from the day of their official adoption. When she looked at herself in the mirror, Emily barely recognized the reflection. Not because she looked different on the outside, but because for the first time, she saw something she had spent her whole life searching for. Peace. Love. Roots. Max, dressed in suspenders and a little bow tie, waited nervously in the garden. "You look beautiful, Mommy," he said with a shy smile. Emily knelt down to straighten his bow tie. "Thank you, sweetheart. You look like a perfect little gentleman." Lila, in a yellow dress with a flower crown in her hair, held a basket of petals. Daisy, also dressed in white, couldn't stop spinning, admiring how her skirt twirled. Ben was at the altar, waiting. When Emily looked at him, everything else disappeared. He looked handsome, not because of the light gray suit, but because of the way his eyes found hers in the crowd, full of love and promises. The music started. Simple. Just a neighbor picking a tune on a guitar. Max walked ahead, serious, carrying a little sign that said, "Here comes Mommy." People smiled, some discreetly wiping away tears. Lila and Daisy came next, tossing petals in a clumsy, adorable way that made everyone sigh. And then it was Emily's turn. She took a deep breath and walked, step by step, feeling every heartbeat, every gaze, every memory, every dream that suddenly was real. When she reached the altar, Ben reached out his hand, and Emily took it without hesitation. "Ready?" he whispered. "More than ready," she said, smiling. The ceremony was short but packed with emotion. Ben spoke first. "I promise," he said, "to love you on the good days and the bad. I promise to build, fix, and start over with you as many times as it takes." Emily could hardly hold back her tears. When it was her turn, she gripped his hands tightly. "I promise," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "to love you with everything I am. I promise to walk by your side, to build our home, to care for our family, and to laugh through our messes. I promise that no matter what happens, you'll never be alone." When the local judge, smiling warmly, declared them husband and wife, the whole farm exploded into cheers and whistles. Ben pulled Emily into a kiss, sweet and full of meaning. Max, Lila, and Daisy ran to hug them, and together the five of them formed a tangle of arms, laughter, and love, right there at the makeshift altar. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Emily looked at her new family and knew she had won. Not because she proved something to the people who doubted her, but because she chose love, and love, always love, chose her right back. The days after the wedding felt like living inside a dream, a simple dream, made of messy breakfasts in the kitchen, toys scattered all over the living room, piles of dirty laundry, and laughter echoing through the house. Emily and Ben quickly learned that married life with 3 little kids wasn't about perfection. It was about patience. About waking up in the middle of the night because Max had a nightmare. About helping Lila build a science project that involved way more glitter than any human being should ever have to handle. About singing Daisy to sleep even when you couldn't remember half the lyrics. And Emily wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. One morning, Emily found a carefully folded envelope sitting on her breakfast plate. Max was sitting across the table pretending it wasn't from him, but his red face and nervous smile gave him away. Emily picked up the envelope carefully. On the front, written in crayon, it said, "To the best mommy in the world." Her heart was already squeezing before she even opened it. Inside was a sheet of notebook paper folded in half, with a letter written in big, wobbly letters. "Mommy, I wanted to say thank you. Thank you for never giving up on us. Thank you for choosing us. I know we're a lot of work sometimes, but you always stay. You hold our hands when we're scared. You make pancakes when we're sad. You make us laugh when we want to cry. I love you to infinity." Signed, Max, and Lila and Daisy too. Emily read the letter twice before she could say anything. She looked up and found Max watching her, his big eyes full of hope. Emily smiled. letting the tears fall freely. She stood up, walked over to him, and pulled him into a tight hug. "I love you too, Max," she whispered, "to infinity and beyond." Lila and Daisy came running and jumped into the hug, laughing and squealing. Ben appeared in the kitchen doorway, watching the scene with that slow, warm smile that made Emily fall in love with him all over again every single day. "Beautiful family," he said, grabbing his coffee cup and leaning against the doorframe. Emily looked at her children, feeling an overwhelming wave of gratitude. She thought about everything she had faced, the judgmental looks, the cruel words, the lonely nights when she almost believed the others were right. And now she knew. She wasn't perfect. She hadn't taken the easy road. But she had won. And looking at Max, Lila, and Daisy, at Ben smiling in the doorway, at the farm so full of life and love, Emily knew she had built something no judgment could ever tear down. A family, a home, a real life. The years passed in the blink of an eye. Emily often found herself thinking about it on quiet Sunday mornings, sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the life they had built. Max grew up fast, and his love for cars turned into a natural talent for mechanics. Lila developed a passion for books and flowers, dreaming of being a writer and owning a flower shop. And Daisy, sweet, shy Daisy, became the artist of the family, painting the world in the most colorful and hopeful ways. Ben remained the steady rock that held everything together. Still fixing fences, still making pancakes on Saturdays, still holding Emily when she needed a reminder that it was okay to mess up sometimes. And Emily bloomed. She found joy in the small things, the laughter around the table, the unexpected hugs, the drawing stuck on the fridge, the nights when everyone fell asleep together on the couch watching old movies. The woman who had once been called too fat, too much of a dreamer, unfit to be a mom had proven, not to the world but to herself, that love isn't measured by appearances, approval, or perfection. True love is what you build when no one's looking. It's what you plant every single day, even on the hard ones. One golden evening, while Emily and Ben walked hand in hand through the farm, they stopped to watch Max fixing an old tractor and Lila reading to Daisy under the shade of an oak tree. Ben gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "Do you remember?" he said with a smile. "The woman who once thought she couldn't be a mom?" Emily smiled, feeling tears prick her eyes. "I remember her," she said. "But she doesn't exist anymore." Ben pulled her closer and kissed her forehead. "And she never will again." They stood there in silence, listening to the sound of the children, the rustling of the trees, and the distant hum of crickets. The farm, the family, the love. It was all more than Emily had ever dared to dream. And there, on that piece of land in Oak Ridge, North Carolina, under a sky painted pink and gold, Emily knew with every fiber of her being, she had found her forever. Not in a fairy tale, not in a perfect plan, but in every tiny imperfection, in every second chance, in every small piece of love planted and nurtured with patience and faith. And that kind of love, oh, that love, was forever. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more beautiful and inspiring stories like this one. See you in the next story. God bless you and your family.